I did a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Ultra Moon, but with a twist. I asked viewers to vote for up to 10 Alolan Pokemon to ban from my playthrough, and after over 10,000 votes, the top 50% were wiped from existence. It's as if Thanos was vacationing in the Alola region, but it looks like he was more trigger-happy this time because all non-Alolan Pokemon were banned as well, leaving me with just 22 potential encounters. These 22 Pokemon are the overlooked, the underappreciated, the visually grotesque. In a Nuzlocke, if a Pokemon faints, it's dead forever, and I can only catch one eligible encounter per route. The rest of the rules for my hardcore Snaplock are shown here and in the description down below. With Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon being known as the absolute hardest baseline Pokemon games in the entire franchise, we've got our work cut out for us. It's gonna take uncompromised guts, tragic sacrifices, and like with any great campaign, a generous benefactor to fund our travels. Which leads me to the sponsor of this video,
Raid Shadow Legends.
I don't want to hear a peep from you, Garchomp FJ.
Raid Shadow Legends
is a tactical mobile game featuring countless awesome champions that you can play as to fight your way through intense PvE and PvP challenges. For example, you'll have to face off against the villainous six-headed Hydra, each with their own unique battle mechanic. The Head of Suffering is all about making you suffer, obviously. With the Pain Link mechanic, damaging the Head of Suffering will hurt you too, so good luck. Meanwhile, the Head of Blight is all about making you blight. Just kidding, this nasty son of a gun drains your team's health with poison clouds, so you'll want to shut him down quickly with some HP burn champions. My favorite part of
Raid Shadow Legends
is the range of different champions. My personal favorites are the beefy orcs, like my man Gallic here. By the way, do you want a free legendary champion? Silly question, of course you do. Check out the mischievous Monkey King Sun Wukong, a free legendary champion if you log into
Raid Shadow Legends
on 7 different days between August 22nd and October 23rd. And for new players, you can score one of the best epic champions, Stag Knight, featuring a skin designed by JonTron himself by using the promo code JTSkin before October 7th. Plus, use my link or scan the QR code on the screen to get a free starter pack with all this cool in-game loot. Be sure to hit my link in the description down below and I'll see you on the battlefield. Thanks so much to
Raid Shadow Legends
for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get started with the challenge. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Our Alolan Snaplock begins the same way every Snaplock begins, by choosing my starter and then immediately throwing it away. The 3 starters are routinely among the most voted for Pokemon in every single Snaplock, and this one is no different. So, despite what appears to be a touching moment between Boy and his legless dog, Poplio is getting the boot as soon as I pick up my actual starter, a Pikipek. And as custom dictates, I name my first encounter after the first Avenger himself, Cap. But Cap's not going at this alone because I can quickly catch an Alolan Meowth from the trainer school named Black Widow. And since Alolan Meowth evolves via friendship, I can get a very overpowered Alolan Persian by running around the trainer school like a chicken with my head cut off for a very long time. Fun fact, did you know that Pokemon gain friendship faster in their Met location? Pretty neat. Anyways, with the stupidly shaped but fully evolved Persian on the squad, I can fairly confidently dispatch Alima's Yungoos and Smeargle, who are normally a massive early game pain. After that, I can head to Route 2 and catch a Crabrawler from a berry pile. She-Hulk here is a wonderful encounter to get, since she's able to eviscerate the first Totem Pokémon, an Alolan Raticate, with a single quad-effective Brick Break. And speaking of, with their leader ruthlessly murdered, I can catch my own Alolan Rattata, who managed to dodge the snap by literally one single vote. This is why voting is important, people.
Pokemon go to the polls.
But don't worry, I promise right now that I won't use Miss Marvel to cheese the Ultra Necrozma fight, or my name isn't Dr. One Ball HG. If you want to make sure that you don't miss the chance to vote in future Snaplocks, make sure to follow me on Twitter or join my Discord. And you can consider becoming a channel member on YouTube or a patron on Patreon to get extra votes that are worth extra points. Anyways, in Melee Meadows, I catch an Oricorio named Dazzler. While not exactly an incredible Pokemon, she's the perfect answer into Hala and his fighting types, meaning that with just a few air cutters, we've won the grand trial of Melee Island. So we're off to the far bigger Akala Island, where a whole slew of new challenges await. Starting first with a battle against Sina, who has a Glaceon that is incredibly powerful at this point in the game. Fortunately, you can abuse the fact that the AI won't go for Icy Wind if your Pokemon is already slower, which makes this battle far more manageable, meaning that we're victorious. On Route 5, I catch a Fomantis, creatively named Mantis, and despite being cute as a button, this Pokemon is tragically terrible until it evolves at level 34, which is not for a very long time. On Route 4, I catch a Yungoos named Wasp, who graciously does evolve before it's time to take on the Togedemaru in Lana's water trial. This monstrous Pokemon is beyond terrifying. With his water bubble ability and permanent rain, Araquanid hits like an absolute truck. A perfect blend of defensive EVs and natural bulk make him nearly impossible to one-shot, and a speed boost at the start of the battle means that nothing will outspeed this unstoppable beast. Except Dazzler, who can still outspeed to hit a Supersonic Sky Strike Z move for a truly impressive amount of damage. It isn't quite enough for the one-shot, but Bubble actually doesn't do that much in return, and even though the Togedemaru does call in a Masquerain for help, a Peck on the next turn gets the KO onto the Totem Pokemon. And then, on the next turn, we strike down the Masquerain, winning the second island trial of what is supposed to be a difficult game. But I guess there's just no stopping Dr. One Ball HG. On Route 7, I catch a Pyukumuku, a Pokemon that I have literally zero experience using. I know absolutely nothing about this thing, including how to actually pronounce its name, so comment section go nuts. My Pyukumuku, named Rogue, has a quiet nature, which is pretty lousy since she literally cannot learn a single damaging move. It's pretty clear that this squishy sea cucumber is only useful for toxic stalling, which won't even be possible for quite some time, and baton passing stat boosts, which I won't be doing in this playthrough. So, I don't know. At least we have a fire-type resistance in time for Kiawe's island trial against Totem Alolan Marowak. I lead with Black Widow, who kicks things off by using Thief to steal our enemy's held Thick Club, drastically reducing his damage output. Even so, a super effective Brick Break does a massive chunk to Black Widow before Marowak calls in Salazzle to make this a very scary 2v1. I switch to Dazzler as Salazzle goes for a very strong Flame Burst, and Alolan Marowak goes for a Brick Break that isn't very effective, but still manages to crit. Marowak detects on the following turn, so our Feather Dance is useless, though based on the fact that Salazzle nearly kills Dazzler with a Flame Burst anyways, that detect essentially saved Dazzler's life. Now though, I'm in a rough situation. I decide to switch to Rogue, who comfortably eats the combination of Flame Burst and Flame Wheel. But since all of her moves are completely useless here, there's nothing I can do, other than click Safeguard, I guess. I think the safest play here is to let Rogue go down so that I can get a free switch into Cap or Wasp. Sometimes Nuzlocks require you to make tough calls. But I just can't do it. Look into Rogue's little eyes and tell me you're okay with me letting her die. She's just so pure. She can literally learn a move called Purify. Plus, who needs a safe switch? Cap is a freaking Avenger. He'll handle this double up just fine. Winning the second island trial of what is supposed to be a difficult game, but I guess there's just no stopping Dr. One Ball HG. Plus, who needs a safe switch? Cap is a freaking Avenger. He'll handle this double up just fine. 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 He'll handle Well, time to send in Wasp and hope for the best. Marowak goes for a Detect, as Salazzle very generously goes for Torment instead of doing damage. This lets Wasp hit her with a nasty Rock Tomb for free. On the following turn, we have to tank the double up of Brick Break from Marowak and Flame Burst from Salazzle, since the latter is still faster than us even after the speed drop. But since Wasp survives with 21 HP, she can kill Salazzle with a Bite, again making this an even 1v1. On the next turn, I switch to She-Hulk, who tanks a Brick Break. Marowak outspeeds to also hit a far stronger Flame Wheel before we get off another Thief for a good chunk of damage. I fear the worst as another Flame Wheel flies towards She-Hulk, but without a crit, she survives with just 3 HP, letting her hit another Thief to win a devastatingly hard-fought battle against a lowland Marowak. It's a very quick trip to get to the 4th island trial, but before that I head back to Brooklet Hill to catch a Morlul, another Pokemon I have zero experience with. That'll be a recurring trend in this playthrough. Fortunately, unlike Rogue, Wanda here is a bit more straightforward. Grass Fairy type is a solid combination, and with access to Spore and an early evolution into Shiinotic, Wanda will be an essential member of the team. The Totem Lurantis in Mallow's Island trial is pretty scary, especially at the low level of 24. But fortunately, she can't hit flying types for even neutral damage. So as long as you do enough damage to her on the first turn so that she calls for Comfey instead of Kecleon, this trial can be walled fairly well by teaching your flyer Roost and bunkering down for a big fat PP stall. Now, Comfey makes things quite a bit more difficult by healing Lurantis with Floral Healing and giving her defense boosts with Flower Shield. Plus, her ability Flower Veil prevents stat drops, which I didn't actually know about. But with enough patience, Dazzler and Wanda are able to work together to stall both Pokemon out of their healing moves. By the way, did you know that Flower Shield gives defense boosts to all grass types on the field? I'm learning so much in this playthrough. Anyways, Wanda is finally able to kill Lurantis with a Signal Beam a full 16 minutes later. And since Comfey only knows Magical Leaf, taking her out is trivial. With that, we've defeated Mallow's trial, and it's time to face off against the Kahuna of Akala Island. But first, I can pick up 2 more encounters. In the lush jungle, I catch my own Comfey named Dr. Strange. It's pretty egotistical to insist on calling yourself Doctor, but that's just one humble man's opinion, I guess. In Diglett Tunnel, I catch... well, would you believe it? A Diglett. I name her Valkyrie, and with a bit of training, she evolves to have beautiful flowing locks. It seems like right before every trial, we've managed to get an incredibly useful Pokemon that makes the matchup much better. And the Akala Island Grand Trial against Olivia and her rock types is no different. Against her Anorith, I lead with Valkyrie, who resists all of his attacks and is able to get the 2-shot without taking much damage. Lileep comes in second, so it's off to Wanda on a very sad brine. We take her out with a few Signal Beams, using leftovers to stay relatively healthy. All that's left then is Lycanroc, but he's completely walled by She-Hulk, who's holding an Eviolite. The dumb dog does manage to get back-to-back flinches with Bite, so I'm only able to get off a single Brick Break before I run the risk of getting crit by her Z-move. Fortunately, I can just switch to Dr. Strange on another resisted Bite. And then a Triage Priority Giga Drain finishes off Olivia's ace, winning us the final trial of Akala Island. After clicking Bulldoze into the Ultra Beast at Aether Paradise, we're off to Ula Ula Island, and the first stop is Route 11, where I catch a Komala named Shadowcat. Komala was the least voted for Pokemon by a pretty large margin, which is quite disrespectful. I think you all owe Shadowcat an apology in the comments down below. Also fairly low in the rankings is Minior, who I catch on Mount Hokulani and name Thor. Yet again, I have never used or even seen this Pokemon before, but I'm excited to see what they can do. That'll have to wait though, because Thor's on the bench for the fight against the Totem Togedemaru. The good news is that Togedemaru has a quad weakness to ground type moves and can only hit Valkyrie with resisted Iron Heads. Now, he does get a +2 boost to his defense at the start of the battle, so Bulldoze doesn't hit terribly hard, especially since it's a spread move after Skarmory comes in. Nevertheless, everything works out fine. Is what I would say if I was a liar. Despite resisting both Iron Head and Steel Wing, Valkyrie is about as bulky as a piece of string cheese during a hot summer day. So even though she manages to take the KO on Togedemaru, a Steel Wing from Skarmory takes down Valkyrie before we can close out the battle. Black Widow comes in to avenge Valkyrie's death with a few water pulses, so we've won the 5th island trial, but it doesn't feel great to lose my Steel type.
Fortunately, I can catch another one from Blush Mountain right away, and ironically, it's a Togedemaru named Iron Man. I also catch an Alolan Graveler named The Thing from Route 12, who thankfully didn't blow up on me, a Bruxish from Route 13, who is easily the ugliest Pokemon I've ever seen, no offense Mystique, and a lonely little Alolan Sandshrew named Iceman from Tapu Village. With these new pickups, we're ready to tackle the Totem Mimikyu in the abandoned Thrifty Mega Mart. I lead with Shadowcat for her debut battle. She eats a Play Rough and then uses a U-turn to break Mimikyu's disguise and get a safe switch into Iron Man as Mimikyu calls Bayonet to her aid. Mimikyu crits Iron Man with a Shadow Claw for a nasty amount of damage, but then we can retaliate with a Corkscrew Crash Z move to bring her down to just a sliver of HP. Bayonet goes for a Curse, which Iron Man survives with just 11 HP. On the next turn, I switch to Dr. Strange, who tanks another critical hit Shadow Claw and then a feint attack. After getting back a bit of HP with leftovers, I take the gamble that a priority Giga Drain will be enough to finish off Mimikyu, and thankfully I'm right. The Totem Pokemon falls, and then a few turns later, our resident doctor finishes off Bayonet, winning us the 6th island trial without any casualties. Up next is a slew of mini-boss battles that are all ultimately skippable. If there's one thing that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon have a lot of, it's mini-boss battles. And cutscenes. Hitting every single boss battle in this playthrough would make this video unbelievably bloated, so I'll be skipping almost all of them. In fact, here's a list of all the mini-boss fights that I will or already have skipped. The next major fight is the Ula Ula Island Grand Trial against Nanu. He leads with a Sableye and I lead with Wanda. By putting our foe to sleep with Spore and getting the KO with Moon Blast, Wanda can use her leftovers to stay at pretty full HP. Since Persian is second, I switch out to Iron Man on a Fake Out, who gets a nice stick of HP with his Iron Barbs. Then I bring in Dr. Strange on a predicted Black Hole Eclipse. It still does a sizable chunk of damage, but with the Z move used up, I can safely bring Iron Man back in to paralyze Persian with a Nuzzle. On the next turn, I switch to She-Hulk, who's evolved into Crabominable. Nanu ends up also switching out into Krokorok, so on the following turn, I switch into Thor, who gets hit by a Swagger. This gives me a safe-ish switch into Dr. Strange on a Crunch, who can then get the KO with a few Giga Drains. With Persian coming back out, I bring She-Hulk back in, and then kill the cat with an all-out pummeling Z move, winning us the battle. There's some admittedly pretty tricky fights at Aether Paradise, but these stooges are just obstacles before the real challenges in the endgame, so let's keep it rolling. Once we've arrived on Pawnee Island, I fish up a Dhelmise named Namor in the Seafolk Village. Then on Exeggutor Island, I catch, well, what do you know, an Exeggutor. I name him Ant-Man, but as we go to face off against the 7th Totem Pokemon Komala, it's just gonna be Namor joining the squad. My lead, however, is Iron Man. With an Omni Boost, Komala is a pretty terrifying threat, but Iron Man baits Drain Punch, which causes Komala to take an 1/8 of his HP every time he hits into our spiky shield. Komala calls in Noivern, but that's fine since she'll just want to go for either Boom Burst or Screech. This gives me a perfectly safe switch into Namor, and since they now bait a Dragon Claw from Komala and an Air Slash from Noivern, I can pivot back into Iron Man, who resists both moves and does some additional chip with Iron Barbs every time Komala attacks. So I can then go for a Spiky Shield, and then repeat this cycle a few times until the Spiky Shield and Iron Barb's chip damage brings Komala down to the sliveriest of slivers of HP. Now, even with leftovers, Iron Man doesn't have enough HP to survive the last cycle needed to kill Komala, so instead I bring in Dr. Strange, who can use a priority Giga Drain to take out Komala's last little tick of HP. A few turns later, Thor kills Noivern with a few power gems, and the island trial of Vast Pawnee Canyon has been defeated. But that means it's off to Ultra Space to save the world? Multiverse? I don't know. Regardless, we're about to come face to face with one of the hardest bosses of any Pokemon game, Ultra Necrozma. This Ultra Beast has 167 base attack and special attack, 97 HP defense and special defense, 129 speed, and an Omni Boost at the start of the battle. Virtually every Pokemon in the game crumbles like a cookie in front of this otherworldly god. There are really only a handful of strategies that can be used to reliably beat this Pokemon in a hardcore Nuzlocke. The most common strategy is known as Fear, Focus Sash, Endeavor, Quick Attack, and Rattata. You take a Rattata, give it a Focus Sash to survive a single hit with 1 HP, click Endeavor to bring Ultra Necrozma down to 1 HP, and then use a priority quick attack to seal the deal. Now, despite you all failing to properly ban Alolan Raticate, I did promise not to cheese Ultra Necrozma with Miss Marvel, and I'm a man of my word, so Fear strats are off the table. But I made no promises about Fesk strats, baby. Ultra Necrozma, bow down to your Kryptonite. Shadowcat the level 39 Komala. You can't tell me that this image isn't funny. The 1 foot 4 inch Komala is about to kill the 24 foot Ultra Necrozma literally in her sleep. Cheese never tasted so good. Photon Geyser unsurprisingly brings Shadowcat down to 1 HP, letting her use Endeavor and then promptly kill Ultra Necrozma on the next turn with a priority Sucker Punch. I'm sure this was incredibly unsatisfying to some of you watching, but personally, I'm having a blast. With the world saved, we can turn our attention back to becoming champions and avenging those lost in the Great Alolan Snaplock. The first thing to do is take on Mina's trial, which requires you to backtrack to the different islands and fight previous trial captains for various colored flower petals. All of these fights are pretty unremarkable, except the one against Lana. Her Ace Araquanid is horrifying and hits unreasonably hard with Water Bubble boosted, max attack EV charged liquidations. Look at how much damage it does to Wanda, who resists the attack. I'm hoping that Dazzler can survive a non-critical hit so that she can fire off a flying type Z move, but that hope is ill-conceived, and Araquanid cleanly KOs one of my oldest teammates. Now, Ant-Man can fortunately come in, barely tank a leech life, and then kill Araquanid in one shot with a Bloom Doom, so the battle is won without any more casualties, but Dazzler's death was absolutely avoidable with a bit of smart pivoting. I just grossly underestimated Araquanid's damage output and paid the price. Rest well, my sweet bird. After collecting the remaining petals, I have to fight the final Totem Pokémon, Ribombee. Since she gets a double Omni boost, she can be quite scary, but fortunately most Steel types handle her just fine. I go with Iceman, who has evolved into an Alolan Sandslash. A Corkscrew Crash isn't quite enough for the one-shot, but we're never in any real danger against this wannabe Jiminy Cricket. After tanking a Bug Buzz, a Gyro Ball takes her out, and since her helper Blissey has no attacking moves, we're safe to get a one-shot with Iron Head, winning us an underwhelming final island trial. And speaking of underwhelming, the Pawnee Island kahuna, Hapu, is also a breeze. An Ice Punch from She-Hulk one-shots her lead Golurk, a Bloom Doom from Ant-Man one-shots her Mudsdale, Wanda walls her special Flygon that knows a whopping 2 moves, and then of course Wanda can also one-shot her Gastrodon with a Giga Drain. So that means we're finally off to the Pokemon League at the top of Mount Lanakila. And along the way, there's one last eligible Pokemon to catch, a Drampa. This Pokemon is incredibly good and most certainly only survived the snap because most people either A, did not know it existed, or B, forgot that it existed. So one ball later and Shang-Chi has joined the team in the 11th hour. After some last-minute training and prep, here's my final team, all leveled up to the level cap of 57 to match the aces of each member of the Elite Four. With some truly difficult enemies still left to face, these guys are going to need to pull out all of the stops to finish this run. Let's see if they've got what it takes. First up is Kahili, by far our best matchup. After Thor sets up Stealth Rock, a few Power Gems take out her lead Braviary. Thor can also nail her Hawlucha with a hard Psychic, but thanks to his speed EVs, even in our core form, we're not fast enough to outspeed, so we gotta switch out. It's off to Doctor Strange on a resisted Throat Chop. Then, after tanking a Poison Jab, a Dazzling Gleam gets the KO. Mandibuzz is third and is annoying to deal with due to Flatter, but by first nailing her with a Leech Seed and then switching to Iron Man on a Brave Bird, we can get the KO with my mouse at full HP. Kahili's Oricorio takes 50% from rocks as she comes out, and then Shang-Chi can switch in and take out the remaining 50% with a Thunderbolt. Last is Toucannon, so I bring in Iron Man to tank his Supersonic Sky Strike. Then we retaliate with a Gigavolt Havoc, which obviously gets a clean KO, winning us the battle against the first member of the Elite Four. Next is a familiar face, Olivia. She leads with Armaldo, who's comfortably walled by Iron Man. A few super effective Iron Heads are enough to get the KO without taking too much damage in return. Probopass is second and threatens a KO with Earth Power, but a bit of systematic switching means that I can bring Namor in on a soft Power Gem and then take the KO with a quad effective Brick Break. That brings in Lycanroc, so I switch to Iceman on a soft Crunch. Our Ice Steel typing seems to bait counter, which lets Iceman move first and get a clean one-hit kill with a Corkscrew Crash. So Gigalith comes out fourth, but we're bulky enough to tank one hit. An Iron Head does about 50% before we get nailed by a strong Stone Edge. I don't want to risk a low roll with a second Iron Head, so I switch to Shang-Chi. A Stone Edge comes out and my heart drops as his HP bar shoots down. Fortunately, it stops just shy of getting a clean one-hit kill, so Shang-Chi survives the critical hit and is safe to finish off Gigalith with a Dragon Pulse. That just leaves Cradily, but she's walled by Namor. A few anchor shots and the rematch against Olivia is won. So, third is Acerola. She leads with Bayonet, and I lead with Iron Man, who has been an absolute unit ever since we got him in the mid-game. His ability to hit fast and get that residual chip from Spiky Shield and Iron Barbs has been immensely useful, and it'll continue to be. Though against Bayonet, we're able to just take him out with 2 Iron Heads. Since we only got hit by a Screech, Iron Man is at full HP as Palossand comes in second. I switch to Shang-Chi, who comfortably shrugs off an Earth Power, though that does get the special defense drop. Nevertheless, we can outspeed and take out Palossand with a never-ending Nightmare Z move off of a Shadow Ball. Third then is Frostlass. Never a fun Pokemon to deal with, but at least we have Iceman who can't get frozen. I first switch to Doctor Strange, who's able to set up a Leech Seed before getting confused by a Confuse Ray. This way I can switch to Iceman without being worried about getting confused on the switch. Plus the Leech Seed does keep us healthy. It also forces Acerola to heal with a full restore, meaning that we can comfortably take the kill with an Iron Head without taking any more damage. That brings in Dhelmise, who just goes down to 2 Ice Punches. I have no idea why Acerola's Dhelmise knows Shadow Ball instead of Shadow Claw, since their attack is significantly better than their special attack. But in general, Acerola's team is pretty unoptimized, as made very clear by her 5th and final Pokemon, Drifblim. Based on her moveset, this Pokemon is clearly meant to set up Focus Energy, Amnesia, and potential Omni Boost with Ominous Wind, before then baton passing those boosts to another one of Acerola's stronger Pokemon. In theory, it's pretty scary. The issue is that because of the way that the AI chooses which Pokemon to send out, Drifblim will essentially always come out last. The AI will always send out the Pokemon that knows the move with the highest base power, factoring in type matchups against the player's current Pokemon. Since Drifblim only knows the 60 base power Ominous Wind, and all of Acerola's other Pokemon know the 80 base power Shadow Ball, they will always be prioritized over Drifblim, which is stupid. But anyways, since Drifblim can't touch Shang-Chi, I can just sit there and click Shadow Ball until we manage to get a crit and break through her special defense boosts, winning us the battle against the 3rd member of the Elite Four. But the final member of the Elite Four, Molayne, is by far the hardest. His squadron of steel types is no laughing matter. Klefki can set up Prankster Spikes or Reflect, Bisharp is very strong and has max speed EVs, Magnezone is even stronger and has Sturdy to avoid being one-shot, Metagross is a freaking pseudo-legendary, and Alolan Dugtrio is ridiculously fast and deceptively strong. Without a fire type or a ground type, this could very well be a total disaster. I lead with Shang-Chi into his Klefki, and right away I luck out as Klefki goes for Reflect instead of Spikes. The latter would have made switching far more punishing, but Reflect isn't too bad, and we can get the one-shot with a Flamethrower. That brings in Molayne's Metagross, who threatens a knockout with Hammer Arm, so I switch to Namor. I need to stall out Reflect, so I start with a Protect. Since Metagross is going for Meteor Mash, I switch to Iron Man, who quad resists and also baits Hammer Arm. A Spiky Shield on the following turn lets my mouse get back to nearly full HP as the Reflect finally fades. Then it's another free switch to Namor. We have to tank a pretty nasty Meteor Mash, which gets a very terrifying attack boost, but fortunately a never-ending Nightmare is enough for a one-shot. That brings in Bisharp, which means it's off to Iceman. Night Slash crits on the switch, which sucks, but fortunately we still survive a follow-up Iron Head, which generously doesn't flinch, letting us take the KO with a quad-effective Brick Break. Now we gotta deal with Alolan Dugtrio though, and frankly the only way to do this is by switching between Thor and Iron Man. Thor is immune to Earthquake, and Iron Man resists Iron Head. Had Klefki gone for Spikes, I think I'd have been in a lot of trouble here. But since Iron Man doesn't take an eighth of his HP every time he switches in, I can safely whittle away at Dugtrio with Iron Barb's chip, using leftovers to stay healthy. Once again, it's death by 1,000 cuts. After Dugtrio's out of Earthquake PP, taking a Sucker Punch and going for an Iron Head is enough to finish him off, leaving Molayne with his final Pokemon, Magnezone. Before switching, I have Iron Man break Magnezone sturdy with a Zing Zap. Then it's off to Shang-Chi, who comes in on a Screech. All we gotta do is take a nasty Flash Cannon, which again gets a special defense drop, before we take the KO with a Flamethrower, winning us the final battle of the Elite Four. I really cannot stress how much harder that would have been if Spikes were set up. I'm very lucky to still have a full team of 6 Pokemon left. And it's a good thing too, because Hao is sneakily one of the hardest champions in any Pokemon game. His team is stacked like a plate of pancakes, but I've got a plan, and I trust that my team can execute it. For all the marbles, let's finish this Snaplock right here, right now. Hao leads with his zippy Alolan Raichu, and I lead with Namor the Dhelmise. My ghostly anchor tanks a nasty Psychic, and then quickly nabs a one-hit KO with a Shadow Claw. Leftovers gives us back a bit of health, and then Hao brings in the big guns. Mother frickin' Incineroar. I hard switch into Thor the Minior. Hey, that rhymes. They manage to take a massive Inferno Overdrive, which does enough to bring them below 50%, activating their Shields Down ability. With that, we can comfortably outspeed Incineroar and retaliate with our own Z move, netting another clean one-shot. So, third is Hao's ugly Crabominable. A Protect reveals that he's going for Ice Hammer, which will grant me a pretty safe switch into Iceman and drop Crabominable's speed, letting us move first on the following turn. Well, I think it's pretty obvious why this is bad, but just to be clear, Hao's Crabominable has max attack and max speed EVs, meaning that the only Pokemon that has a chance to one-shot him does not outspeed and takes super effective damage from moves that are now coming off of a +1 132 base attack stat. I calced that Dr. Strange could maybe survive a single Ice Hammer as long as it didn't crit, meaning that he should be able to get a 2-shot with Dazzling Gleam, but I forgot to factor in the 20% boost from Crabominable's Iron Fist ability, so a second Ice Hammer gets another clean 1-shot, and Alola's most brilliant medical mind falls. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what experts call a choke. I am Squidward choking on a whole ass fork levels of throwing this battle. I've let my Pokemon down, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to recover from this. Fortunately, I can at least bring Iron Man in and kill Crabominable with an Iron Head. That brings in Tauros, who threatens with Earthquake, so now I gotta switch to Thor, and then I can switch to Iron Man on an Iron Head to get off some Iron Barb's damage. It's the same thing as against Molayne's Alolan Dugtrio, only this time I can't really afford to rack up that much damage on Iron Man or waste too many of his Spiky Shield power points, so eventually I just switch to Namor on a resisted Earthquake. After a turn of protecting, I tank an Iron Head, and then get the KO with a Brick Break, bringing Hao down to just 2 Pokemon. But the problem is that his 5th Pokemon, Noivern, can outspeed my entire team. Had Dr. Strange been alive, this wouldn't have been a problem since he could just tank a few air slashes and get a quick kill with Dazzling Gleam. But with our dear Doctor departed, it's all up to Iron Man. He resists Air Slash on the switch, but unfortunately Noivern knows Dark Pulse, which still does decent damage. We can gain back a good amount of HP from leftovers and Spiky Shield stall, and we're able to hit back with Zing Zap or Iron Head for meaningful damage. With leftovers recovery, we are out damaging the Speedy Drake, but unfortunately Hao can heal with a full restore. I do predict it, so at the very least I don't flub a Spiky Shield for nothing. But unfortunately, Noivern's next Dark Pulse flinches, and then the following one gets a critical hit, leaving Iron Man with just 6 HP. To make matters worse, Hao uses another full restore, so it's clear that despite his best efforts, Iron Man cannot win this matchup. With one last Dark Pulse, Noivern kills the mightiest of my teammates, leaving me with just 3 Pokemon and exactly 1 last out. If Shang-Chi can survive a Dragon Pulse here, we can retaliate with a KO. But if Noivern crits, Shang-Chi falls, and then Noivern proceeds to outspeed and one-shot the remaining 2 members of my team. I hold my breath and cross my fingers as Noivern fires off his Dragon Pulse. Time slows down as our noble dragon's HP bar drops. Is this where our journey ends? Thankfully, no. Shang-Chi survives, Berserker activates, and an overkill, choice specs boosted Dragon Pulse snipes Iron Man's killer out of the sky and forces Hao to send out his final Pokemon, Leafeon. It's not quite over yet though, because Leafeon still hits ridiculously hard. A switch to Namor shows that Leaf Blade, despite being resisted, does a sizable chunk of damage. Fortunately, Leftovers and Protect gives us a lot more HP to work with, especially because we can use Phantom Force to recover even more HP. And since Leaf Blade is Leafeon's only attacking move other than Quick Attack, we might be able to pull this off. Though a critical hit definitely doesn't help. It's also not great that Phantom Force doesn't appear to be a 2-hit kill here. With a turn of Protect, Namor gets back to 45 HP, which should be enough to survive another Leaf Blade. Oh my god. We survive with 1 freaking HP. Namor's second Phantom Force does indeed fail to kill Leafeon, so unfortunately Hao uses yet another full restore, though that does mean that we're able to go for a Phantom Force for free. And this one manages to high roll and bring Leafeon into the yellow. By the time we've protected again, Namor is back to 61 HP, which is 16 more HP than last time, so all we gotta do is dodge one last critical hit. Leafeon goes for Leaf Blade, and Namor survives. And then, on the following turn, Phantom Force connects with another high roll, cleanly killing Leafeon and winning us not just the battle against Hao, but the entire Alolan Snaplock by the skin of our teeth. And with that, another run comes to an end. Once again, Thanos has been bested, and the balance has been restored to the universe. This playthrough was a blast, especially during the Elite Four and the final fight against Hao. I really had to stay on my toes and figure out how to deal with some very challenging threats. I think one of the most underrated aspects of these games in regards to their difficulty level is how many enemy Pokemon have max speed EVs, which makes them very difficult to outspeed, ensuring that they will almost always get off at least one powerful attack before going down. Consistently moving second makes it significantly harder to deal with enemy Pokemon, but boy does it make for some intense battles. As always, thank you all so much for watching this video. And thank you for being so understanding of me taking a bit more breaks over the last few months. The responses to my community post last week, they really made me so happy. I'm really lucky to have been able to grow a compassionate and kind community, which is something that is rarer than it should be online. Anyways, thank you all so much, and if you enjoyed watching, it'd always be great if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Or don't, I don't know. But I do know that you should follow me on Twitter and Twitch to keep up with streams of my future ROM hack challenges. You should also subscribe to my highlights channel to get highlights of the challenge I'm currently streaming before it's cut down to a video on the main channel. And you should consider subscribing to my Patreon or becoming a channel member on YouTube, which are the best ways to directly support the channel. The links to everything are in the description below. Stay tuned for more Nuzlocke videos, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.